All right, Bear. Come on, man. Bring it. It's good to see you, brother.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I was telling you, man, that before we got started here today, I was doing more of a deep dive on you. I've always been a fan. Um, your song Brother in particular, like that one, like, I don't know, it just encapsulates, I think, the dad edge in our community because we're a huge community of fathers and we all got each other's back. But dude, this song, man, Fall on Me. And I
Yeah.
saw the before I listened to the whole thing, I went to your Instagram. So by the way, guys, if you're not following Bear on Instagram, please go follow Needtobreathe on Instagram. But Fall on Me and the way you actually introduced that song in concert. And then I went to YouTube and I
Right.
watched the video and I was just like, I found myself at the desk here, freaking tears, man, rolling down my eyes.
Yeah.
Like,
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
of course, you know what, we could start on all kinds of different places, but to be honest, man, since that song is so fresh, like, uh, that I just listened to it. I've listened to it before, but I really listened to it this time. Tell me about how that even came to be.
Yeah, I think, um, I try to write songs about what I'm going through, obviously, and I tell this. It's like when I dropped my oldest kid at kindergarten the first time, I was shocked by the feeling I had. I think most people probably, if they don't have kids, they think, oh, it's going to be the greatest day. You're going to take this picture and whatever. Sad they're growing up or whatever it is. But it wasn't. It was like I literally opened the door to let him out. And it's like, uh oh. It's like my first thought was like, man, he's going to fail at this miserably. And I thought just like, man, and I think that sort of is your like probably my worldview a lot. Also, it's like, man, the life is tough and it's going at you fast, and I had a tough sort of childhood in certain ways, that you still deal with now. And so really, I think I started telling my boys, I mean, when they were first born, I've always told them, like, I love you no matter what. It's not because, why do I love you? And I make them tell me it's because I'm your son. I was like, there's nothing that you do that's going to make you love me more or make me love you more. And so I think that's where the song really came from. It's like, a simple kind of message. Sometimes the songs get a little, I don't know, above their heads even. But I feel like with that song, it was just like, if I played this to them, would they understand what I mean? I'm somewhere that's safe to come home to. You can tell me anything. I know mistakes are going to happen. It's not going to change the way I look at you. And I feel like that's true, obviously, in all relationships. That's really what everybody's looking for. I think that took me a lot longer to learn than it should have, probably even in my marriage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm sort of obsessed with that idea of like what a love song is, because most of the good songs are love songs in some form or fashion. We have a song called "Banks for Your River," similar kind of idea of like the way I see my wife. It's like, I just want to be the banks to your river. I'm not trying to tell you where to go. You're too strong for that. Like, I love you because you're who you are. But hey, I'll be here if you need me, kind of thing. So that's, I think, where that song came from.
Man, it's I'll tell you what, it's crazy that you have three boys, I have four. And
Nice.
I'm having these conversations now. My two older ones are 16, 18, and we're having those conversations now. It's crazy that I really dove into that song right before this interview because we just had this conversation probably 2 or 3 weeks ago where there were some things that were going on, and like I'm like, hey man, like I just and he was sort of like he was in a very tough spot and didn't know if certain things that were happening, if he could share them, right? And we've always had this very open relationship, and I'm like, dude, I was like, look, man, there's nothing you can do ever
Yeah.
that's that bad that you can't come home, you can't talk to me. Like when all hell breaks loose and someone
Mm-hmm.
throws the feces on the other side of the osculating fan and it's on you in your
Right.
direction,
Yeah.
that's the time, man. Come back here, dude. You got a safe place to land. I love that you
Yeah.
wrote that song, man. You you
Thanks.
you mentioned a tough childhood. So tell me about that.
Yeah. Just, some different, I mean, all kinds, everybody has their own thing. I think for me, it was tough. I moved to a new town when I was in 6th grade. My dad was a preacher. So we go to this small town, Seneca, South Carolina, and they have a church school there. And it was a kind of a weird deal because you're the preacher's kid, you kind of have to go there. So 6th and 7th grade, I went there. I'd been homeschooled before that. And so I'm in a classroom in 6th grade with 6th through 12th graders. There's 25 people in one classroom.
Oh my gosh.
And so not a lot of social development, or at least properly, Then I go to 8th grade. I went to public school for the first time, where all these other kids have been in middle school together. And I was, you have a record called The Outsider. I was the definition of it, in the sense of just like, not in either. It was a little bit like racially, charged, I would say, that school was. And I was like, I'm not with these kids that like Metallica. The black dudes don't like me. And now I'm playing football and got bullied a ton, to the point where it was like, I don't think I ate lunch one time in 8th grade, at the thing, because of different things, social situations that were going on. I had teachers have to walk me. I was getting threats. I became the quarterback, in 8th grade, and kid that had played the year before in 7th grade, I'd like beat him out for that job. So they're literally walking me to basketball practice every single day, a teacher, because the first day of school, walking back from lunch, a guy comes up behind me. We're walking back, and he elbows me in the back of the head, knocks me down. Yeah, and no one says anything. I didn't even see who the guy was. It's just like, I go down, get up. There's not somebody to help. It wasn't like, so there was some of that. I think that you just deal with, you learn to be tough. You learn to be prepared for situations. You know what I mean? Don't get yourself into a bad spot. Always think through it. You trust people a little, but not a lot. So I think some of that kind of thing, in terms of my parents were great in most ways. We grew up really conservative, which I think now is really interesting. Like, they were just young parents. The way I would raise my kids now as a 43-year-old versus 23 is pretty different. And I think it's the same for them. I think they grew up a lot as I grew up a lot, if that makes sense. By the time I was 25, they were different people than they were when I was 5. So there's a lot of grace for that. But I think you look at it and you get into a band, and, there's a lot of relationships that drive your life. We're in a marriage with at least the 5 guys in the band, plus the 20-something crew guys we got out, and all that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's been, I feel like I'm still learning that whole thing. I think hopefully we all are.
I think I don't know if we ever actually get to the top of the mountain and say, yeah, I know it all. Like,
yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's older you get, what's so great about it is that you can admit that you know less.
Right.
I think, not to take it too there, but I feel like that's the kind of things, like they say, the more you know God, the more you know you're not him. I feel like that's kind of that reverse thing that happens, at least for me in my life anyway. The older I get, the more I'm like, whoa, I got a long way to go.
I think we all do, man. It kind of a funny story to build on that. Back in 2022, I wrote a book called Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood, and it covered, faith, it covered marriage, it covered kids, it covered mindset, the whole 9 yards. And the editor was like, why are we calling this book Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood? Why don't we just call it Legendary Fatherhood? Well, he wasn't the CEO. He wasn't a dad. And I was like, well, that's because there's really no such thing. There's only the pursuit of it. There's only that constant learning of it, right? There's not, I don't think anybody actually gets to the top of the mountain or the finish line saying, yes, I figured it out. I know it all. It's a pursuit of this thing. And and I think our parents, like they, and it sounds like your parents were the same way. It's like, think about how we operate in our 20s, like when we have kids, or even in our early 30s. Like we're still just kind of kids, and we're kids raising kids. So, but you have 3 boys. Yeah. And so does Mary just feel like, oh my God, there's like my wife, dude, she's like, oh my gosh, there's so much testosterone in this house.
Yeah.
What's Mary like with that?
I think it's cool. She loves it, she's definitely the boy mom, now, which is awesome. I think that, she did not know what was coming. I was always kind of telling her. I think I've been warning her of it's going to smell terrible. We're going to have holes in the sheetrock, like all that. I'm like, you have no idea how much they're going to eat. I was like,
Oh,
I'm
dude.
like, you can't. I was like, I'm just telling you. So I do. She loves that part of the chaos, and you know, she's a nurse practitioner. She's gone back to school, almost done now, for the mental health side, and she's going to get certified in like the play therapy and all that. So like, and she's, you know, the nurse background, so she's perfect for when they get hurt, or if they need somebody to talk to. So I feel very lucky to have somebody that skilled in the house, because you know, I'm like, rub some dirt on it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like with a house of 3, 4, or 5 boys, man. You almost need a medic. You know, you have to have somebody around.
Oh,
And you're right about the groceries, man. I don't know if you remember. You're 43. I'm a little older than you, but I still remember these commercials called Cigarettes. Do you remember that?
I don't think so.
Oh man, so it was like this. It was like a product that people bought if they were smokers and that kind of thing. They had all
Right.
these testimonials, and there was one guy on there. He's like, "I'd have 2 houses right now if I'd given up smoking 30 years
Right.
ago." I was sitting there thinking, like, I'd have 2 houses right now if it wasn't for this grocery bill. So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, totally. It's real.
yeah, man. So talk to me about. I know your faith is super important to you, but raising these young men, right, and also, you know, being in the limelight, being, you know, fame and all this other stuff, there's a lot of things that are garnering for your attention. But you come across to me as yes, you know, you're singer songwriter, but you just seem like fatherhood, man, is so important to you. And you just seem like you've got a very tight relationship with these young men. And I would just like, what do you do to just stay connected to these young men?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of things. I mean, I think to me, one thing that I'm pretty quiet, shy person. So one thing that I have a little bit of a gift with is perception. I've always been, maybe it's from getting bullied back in the day or whatever. I always could read the room. I think with the boys, it's really identifying. And I also had a brother I was really close to that I fought with a lot, you know, but we were close enough in age where it was like we went through a lot of things. I saw both sides. Learning how their differences and what motivates them. It's similar to being on a football team. It's similar to, you know, being in a band the way it is. It's like there's one of my kids you can really drive hard and he's totally cool. He's so confident that it's not going to affect him. There's one that's like the wrong word at the wrong time is really devastating, you know? And I think learning that, being a student of that, listening to them is probably, the thing I try to do the most. And the other thing is, like, you know, I've had a buddy of mine, this guy, John Foreman, he's in a band called Switchfoot. He's really tight with his parents. I ask everybody I meet, I'm like, hey, if I know they're tight with their parents still, I'm like, what was the trick? What was the secret? And he didn't hesitate at all. He's like, my parents were really good at saying they were sorry. And I was like, that hit me hard when I heard it. And I was like, okay, I think I can do that. You know, so I think we try to practice that. And part of the way I do that, my favorite thing with the boys is I start when they're 3 or 4. So the youngest one is like not quite ready to grasp the stories yet, but like I'll tell them a story, play a game at night, and they pick an age, and I tell them a story from my life from that age. And so now which has been crazy. I'm like out of stories with an 8-year-old. He knows every single story I've thought to tell anyone in my life. When I've been injured, when I messed up and got in trouble, and it's a way for him to, I think, to see me in like a not that perfect dad kind of way. You know what I mean? It's like, man,
Like a human being.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
man, I lied at this thing and I got in trouble. And they're like, yeah, I was like, you know why I lied? You know, and we can have that sort of thing. It's like, I lied because I didn't think the person would love me if I told them the truth. And I was like, that's not true. You know, that's not true, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of, I feel like we get to the, you know, the sort of teaching moments through the vulnerability. And so that's probably my favorite part, the fact that they know me so well. Like if I'm with my friends and I'm like, remember that time? They're like, oh, I remember that. They act like they were there, you know?
Right.
So I feel like they know me very well in that way. And that's really important to me because the same thing. It's just, I want them to be able to, I felt like I had a crazy amount. I'm very obviously type A and sort of alpha in that way. And I felt like I didn't have the freedom to be wrong as a kid, whether that was my environment or just me. I think that's really dangerous, obviously, because I think it encourages you to sort of live this inside life or compartmentalize, or, you know, the power of a secret becomes really powerful. And I think that's ultimately what I want the boys to be free of, if anything, you know. And then another thing is, like, I did play sports and I'm a musician. So it's constantly, you know, I want to push them at something if they care about it. But you know, baseball is a great example. It's like I tell them, I mean, 3 times a week, I'm like, you understand, I don't care if you play baseball or not. It doesn't matter to me. You tell me what you love, and I'm gonna help you pursue it. But if you're gonna pursue something, I'm gonna tell you the tools of, if you want to be successful, you tell me that, then I can help you with that. Then I know, then I'm gonna push you, because I'm gonna hold you to it. You tell me you want something, like a, you know, sort of a coach in that way. But it's constant, and my wife's great at that too, just of being like, man, this is on you. Do you want to do this or not? Like, you don't have to do this to impress me. Like, I'm sure I'll enjoy the game, but I'll enjoy, you know, your choir concert just as much, or, you know, the books you love to read. I'm going to celebrate that just as much as these things.
That's really cool, man. I'm curious about, you know, it sounds like not necessarily pushing, but holding them to a higher standard, right? And holding that line of that standard. That's something, like I said, now that I have, you know, 18, 16, 10, and 8. And, you know, I'm especially my oldest right now. We're going through that. Like, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And so you know, your boys sound a lot like mine. I have one, he's my football guy. Like, he works his tail off. He's a savage at it. Like, I can kind of be tough on him, and he just kind of doesn't break, and he's a self-starter. My older one, it's kind of like what you were talking about. It's like that one word, man. It's like that one word. And so I'm curious, especially like with knowing that each of the 3 boys are different, and then holding them to a higher standard. You gotta approach that one very, very differently, right? But
Sure.
maybe for, like, your more sensitive guy, right? The one that you kind of have to push and hold to a high standard, but you also don't want to break him, though. Like, I'm curious
Sure.
about, by the way, this is a very selfish question, because I'm curious
No, that's great.
about
Well,
myself.
I love you say the word standard,
Yeah.
because I think that's something, you know, I had a brother growing up, and my observation of it, and you know, I tell this story because it's like, I played football in college.
Mm-hmm.
We had this conditioning test at the beginning of every year. You had to do 18 110s, 15 seconds or less, with 30 seconds in between. Right? You can't pass that. Then you got to run after practice during 2-a-days, which was, you weren't going to do that. You know, and the coaches, it's like, you got to finish this test, right? Well, so it was all the skill position players. So I was a receiver, DBs, running backs, quarterbacks. Well, my best friend in college, and Scott Billy Napier, is a coach at Florida Gators now. He was not fast. He's a 5'40" guy. I was 4'3" coming out of high school. So, but I have the same test he's got. So he had to train tons harder for it. And I tell the boys that story a lot. I'm like, this is the way it is. If you want to do something, how hard it is to you is going to be different with your brothers. Some things are going to come easy, some things aren't. But that doesn't mean the standard changes, right? It's our job as your parents to say, this is what the standard is. And you got to decide if the effort is worth it. And so I think that's the thing to me with the boys, like, really going like, hey, here's your gifting. This is why you're unique. And we see that, and we want to encourage that. But if you want to do something outside of your gifting, that's also totally possible. But it's going to be a lot harder work for you than your brother at that thing. And that's okay. That's the way life is. It's like, I'm a musician, but I'm shy. So when I do meet and greets, or like these, like, you know, you have to go to these parties where you walk around the room. That's the hardest thing I've had to learn as a musician. I tell them, I'm like, this is parts of your job are going to be tough because of that. You're not going to be gifted in all the things, you know. So I think there's an element to that, a way to kind of push where it's not necessarily about them, but more about, like, there's a standard outside of you.
Yeah.
Like, this is school. They have grades. This is the way their scoreboards here. It's like,
Yep.
you know, and one subject's going to be tougher than the other. And so I do think, I think ultimately, obviously, what we're talking about is like trying to keep them from feeling like a victim, you know, or living out of that. And I think that's really, ownership is hugely important in my house. And we talk about that as much as anything else. It just, hey, you messed this up. this is on you. It's time to take ownership. And I know that's painful, but we're going to walk you through what that looks like. Because if you don't have this skill when you're out of here, like life's gonna be pretty tough.
Dude, I know we're virtual right now, but if we were in person, I'd be like high-fiving you right now because I believe every single word that you just said. It's funny, man. You guys run your ship very similar to ours, which is,
That's
that
awesome.
we always try to do the thing too where I always compare something to later on in life, right? Like, so like every now and again, it's like, Dad, it's just an algebra assignment. I'm like, no, your assignment is your word, right?
Right.
Your quote unquote algebra assignment is gonna be no different than if you own your own business, that's your assignment to your customer. Or if you work for a company, your boss gives you a task, that's your assignment you have to do, whether you agree with it or not. You got to do
Yeah.
those things, right? But yeah, holding that standard is key. You're very bold with your faith, right? And I think that's amazing. And I think especially in this day and age, some folks are they're scared to be bold with their
Sure.
faith, even if they're a believer. But tell me, did the faith element, did this come from your childhood and just your upbringing, or was this just something that maybe even flourished as you got older? Or
Yeah. I mean, I think my story, I mean, obviously was raised around, my dad was a preacher, and I think I believed, in it. It wasn't, and I think it was real. I think, and there was a lot of really good things from that. I don't think it clicked for me in the sense of like, you're always going to have doubts, and I'm definitely that guy. I'm okay with being, having questions about things, and I always will. But I think the amount of questions that actually I believe this, and it's not just a feeling for me, happened a little bit later in life, to be honest. After a lot of sort of failure, a big part of our story as a band, I mean, it's been a long time now. It's 11 or 12 years ago, maybe more than that, 14, 15. But I was a wreck. The whole band was a wreck. We had put success. I was just driven in the sense of, if you just said like, hey, you're going to be successful, I gotta take two of your fingers and be like, go now. I mean, I was not going home until we were going to make it. I basically had that, and that was, that's very toxic, obviously, and it ends up how you treat other people and all those kind of things. So I had a real, come to Jesus, for lack of a better term, in the sense of just like a real bottom out moment of, man, I'm a mess, and I had to face a lot of those things and go, maybe this is not, everybody else's fault. Maybe this is on me. Went to the band, my wife, my parents, everybody, just like sort of had a massive confessional and said like, hey, here's all the skeletons in the closet, and this is how I've been a wreck, and I need you. I'm empowering you from here on out. To hold me accountable to things that I'm saying that I want to do, and not just, hey, it's on you. More just like, you see something that doesn't feel right, I'm giving you, the power to come and say, hey, I don't like this. And even our crew, like we had literally, all the guys that work on the tour and all that. It's like, it's similar to like any sort of big business, probably like a preacher with a bunch of people around them that start enabling, because they're like, well, I can see he's tired. I can see he's not having a good. It's like, oh, maybe he needs a drink. Maybe, it becomes this like real, it's not a great situation, obviously. So them having the power to say that to me. So that's a long-winded way of saying, just like, I had this moment. And I think for me, it became more real. The crux of it was, I grew up thinking the more things you do right, the more righteous you are. Right. The closer, this like some sort of concentric circles, like the closer you get to the middle, the more holy you are. And that never made sense to me, because the people that I saw weren't able to live up to that. Maybe not in huge ways, but certainly in small ways. It was like, I don't think this happened. It feels like the longer they do this, the worse it gets in some ways. And when I was at sort of the bottom of my, experience, I felt the closest to God. And it was like, it snapped something. It's like, oh, this is actually about surrender. This is not about what I do. And that's been, that's powerful. That's something that's like, you know, it's just like everybody, you get confident in something. It's like, oh, I'm doing great. I'm out here. I'm, you know, just all the right things and whatever. But it's like, ultimately that surrender has been the thing. I feel like that's the good news. Like, to me, right? It's not just, this is not just heaven. This is not just all the, you know, the things we grew up hearing. Good news of the gospel is that, God loves you at your absolute worst. And it's going to feel, if you can admit that, it's going to feel like the most when you did the least things right. And I feel like that, you know, just that obviously permeates through our songs that we write and the way I set up my marriage and we treat our kids and life in general. So, yeah, I would say that, like, that, at least the fervor of that, the understanding of that developed later in life for sure.
Hmm. Do you know Granger Smith pretty well?
I don't actually.
No?
I mean, I know of him, but
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
He
never.
came on the show and he said a statement that really was moving. It's a lot. It's right in line with what you're saying. He said, "Surrender is power under control." 'Cause he's a very faith-based person,
Right.
and same thing. Literally, in the darkest time of his whole life, he lost his 3-year-old son drowning in his pool
Yep.
backyard, and he was a moment he was going to take his life. And he said he felt this presence, and he surrendered, and he said he felt that there was that surrender was power under control. Like, just, okay, here I am in all my darkness, and here's what it
Yep.
is. So I love that. I want to ask you a deeper question about going to, it sounds like your family and then even your crew. And I'm sitting there and I'm picturing you saying like, hey, this is everything, right? And I'm asking you that if you see something that's out of line, right, to call me forward. We say that a lot. By the way, side note, we say that a lot in our community with guys. It's like, because I think it's different than calling somebody out. Calling somebody out can be like, well, that could be disrespectful. It can be
Sure.
condescending. But calling forward is like, hey, no, no, I know you. I love you. And I'm calling you forward into the person I know that you want to be. Right.
Yep.
But how how nervous were you to basically just be that authentic with those
I,
folks?
you know, it was obviously there was a process to what was going on, and I think I felt. I mean, you know, people say this a lot. They say, "Oh, I was at the bottom." It's like, well, what is that? And then you get, you know, it's like, is it further? Is it whatever? But I do think I'm incredibly fortunate, in my opinion, to have been at a place where I woke up one day. It's like, I don't care. It's not that I don't care, but I'm okay if this means my wife's going to leave me. If this means I don't have a job anymore. If this means I don't have anything. If this means these friendships are over. If this means, I'm okay with it. This is the most. I'm doing this. I've been carrying this baggage around that, you know, like you said, like, I don't talk about it much because but there was a year or two there where it's so dark. I thought, oh, let me, I wonder if I could run away far enough where I don't feel this anymore. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
these other people seem like they're doing fine. They're not even thinking about it. If I just keep going hard in the paint, maybe I'll just wake up one day and it won't feel terrible. And that obviously never happens. But I would be in the car and think like, I don't really care if I wreck right now. I don't care. You know, I just was in that dark of a place. So I would say the easy part, once that happened to me, um, it was easy in a lot of ways. It's like, I'm actually, it's not just that I want you guys to do this. I'm not going to do this unless we change the culture around this whole thing. Like, here's the way it's going to have to be, or I'm out. Like, this is the only way I can see us going forward. You know, I don't. So I had, you know, really when I talked to the crew, I'd written it out. I was pretty stern with it. Of like, this is how it's going to have to be, or I can't. You know, I didn't drink for a year. It was all that kind of. There was a lot of things I was putting in there of like, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it. And that, you know, it wasn't like it was that one thing that needed to be. It was everything had to change. My perspective had to change. It's going to take some time to develop that, where like the priorities flip. Because as you know, it's like it's really not hard to have those top 2 or 3 priorities flip on you on accident, you know, or just day to day. It's like that one day you wake up, I wish I had that thing. Now that, bam, it's like now I'm not doing it for a purpose. Now I'm doing it for something else. And so I think to me that was a big part of like the early days of that were really like, I'm going to have to train my mind to where daily I'm asking that question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just making decisions and going, because my habits and my things that I've grown up with will just keep happening if not.
I love that, man. And that's a brave thing to do. But there's something really empowering about walking out of the shadow of shame. And we say it a lot, like as soon as you put a spotlight on whatever it is that you're trying to run from, trying to, numb out, or like you just don't want to deal with it. I love that analogy of if I run far enough away, will I not feel this anymore? And the answer to that, and I know, is no.
Right.
It's going to be there no matter how far. It's shining a light on it, and actually even bringing other people in that care more about you. That actually that's the antidote. It really is. It's a terrifying, man.
Oh, dude,
right?
It seems impossible. It's like I think I tell people, like guys that are on the road, if they're struggling with something, it's like my first thing I tell them. I'm like, just see. I promise you, the people around you love you way more than you think they do.
Yeah.
You're not giving them an opportunity to show you grace.
Mm-hmm.
Like and I think that's it is the hard thing to get over, because for me the secret was all about, well, they think of me this way, it's gonna let them down and they'll be gone. What will I have if this becomes? And the truth is, you have nothing until you do it. It's just, you really, that I don't think there's a relationship out there that if you haven't been through a tough conversation like that, like it's hard to really call that love, to me, or connection. It's kind of like, oh, we got things in common. That's cool. But when does the rubber meet the road? And it feels like it's in that moment when you trust them with a thing that you kind of hate about yourself, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently did that myself. It's crazy you're telling me this story, because I went through about a 9-month season where just there was a lot of challenge. Well, here, you're a faith-based guy, so am I. I just literally, as you and I are talking right now, I'm in the pre-launch of a book called Spirit of Fatherhood that I wrote, and official launch is going to be on Father's Day. And when I was writing that, like, dude, the spiritual warfare, I won't even go into the details, but the spiritual warfare was the heat was so high, and there were so many things going on. And there were parts of me, man, that were like crumbling. But looking back on it now, I really think God had a hand in that, because I could not have wrote that book from any other place than being completely stripped down. Right. Mm-hmm. But the thing is I didn't react to it very well. And I was a shell of a man for months with my family and my kids and everything else. And I couldn't figure it out. And then one night at dinner, I was like, I need y'all to sit down and I'm going to read you something. And I wrote my family a letter. And I don't know, this is the second time I'm telling you about crying, and I'm not that big of a crier, but like I completely crumbled at the dinner table in front of my family. I could barely get through this letter. And it was all these things that I was carrying and all these things. And asked for their forgiveness and all this other stuff. And man, every single boy and my wife just stood up, and we got in this circle and we hugged. And there's just like, man, why didn't I do this sooner?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever felt as free.
Yeah.
As that, and it's because that's like the old school hymns and all that, this idea of this burden that you're carrying around. It's real.
It is. Yeah.
And like, I don't know, to me that sin is death, is real. That's like, I would just say before that I was really dead. I'm walking around, but there was no life in what I was doing. It was all driven by the wrong things and all scared and those kind of things. So I think, to me, I think what you're saying is true. And I think, that's the goal, is to keep doing that. Yeah. It never ends. I think my wife has gotten used to the fact that I'm an artist, and it's our like anxiety levels and, self-awareness, all those things like are on a wild ride all the time. And I've gotten much better, but the truth is, like, that's where I write songs from.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't get to skip over it when I go home. It's the same way you're saying when you write a book. It's like, you actually have to delve into this. It's going to get a little murky. You have to stay there a little bit longer. We have the new record's called Caves. It's all about that, coming out of a cave. It's like that. We've spent this time writing this record, self-examining, trying to put, our deepest and darkest things we're thinking about out. And then, and then you go through this transition of like, now we get to go play these songs and celebrate the fact that happened. So I identify for sure.
I hear you, man. And I know you are so, and I respect this about you so much, is you're very open and around mental health and around anxiety and around, things that can, quite frankly, just tax the heck out of us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
When, I, for most people, I think that's a very scary, scary thing to do. Right. Because you're like,
Yep.
oh man, well, if I talk about it, like, will I be labeled or this or that or whatever?
Yep.
But you seem very brave about it. You seem like, and,
Yep.
but tell me where that courage comes from.
I mean, I think my worldview, is partly, I've always felt like, I think from a kid, I knew this about the world. And I think it's only grown more and more of like, it feels like we live in a kangaroo court, like where certain things matter to certain people, certain cultures. They feel great because they achieve the thing that matters to them, that's easiest to them. All the things that aren't easy to them, they ignore them as if they're not things. We are like, I don't know what you call it, epidemic or whatever in our world of like, it's through social media and different cultures, but we're in a place where like you can be anything you want to be. You can be as great as you want to be. All this, I feel like we've like completely lost real self-awareness. Like we're all huge failures. And I think I tell my boys sometimes, I'm like, hey, as confident as you are right now, I want you to be confident. I want you to have a great time. But I also want you to know, like, let's just say you were born and you didn't know your brothers or your parents. You didn't know anybody. Somehow you found a way to eat, right? You'd be the dumbest person that's ever walked the planet. That's what humans are. It's just this collective. We walk around with like, look at that building we built, or that we can do these hearts. We have this pride in humanity that we had nothing to do with it. I mean, it's like I've got a comedian. I can't remember who it was, but it's talking about the. It's like we've done all these great things. Like you haven't. There's been like 5 or 6 smart people. Every couple of years, they did all the work, and all we do is we walk around like, I don't even know how that works, but I like it.
So true.
So I think my thing with mental health is like it comes from a place of like, I don't know. I think I wake up going, man, I'm not that great. Nobody else is either. The idea, like we'll go to coach to whatever, all kinds of things. But we have a hard time with the mental part. It's like, I mean, I wish they would put the mental health thing like in public schools. It's as important as PE. Like if
1,000%.
you know what I mean, that ought to be a class. It just, I mean, maybe it's been a huge part, at least of my development as an adult, but I think it's always made total sense to me. So I think that's the hard part. Like, I guess it's easier for me to say, like, I don't judge anybody for that. I think we live in a cycle. I'm not like the super proponent of like, you got to get a counselor, go every week. I don't think it's the same for everybody. And I think some people, for whatever reason, can become a victim of that also. It's like, well, I can't make any decisions unless I go talk to somebody about it. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's also a cycle. But I think the idea that I just know too many people, man, everybody's wavering about something. And just put if you have it, you're so lucky that the stressors haven't come into your life. But they're gonna. If they hadn't happened yet, it's gonna happen, and you're gonna question everything.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I mean, wouldn't you want to have the tools? If I'm building a house, I'd like to know how to do it before I go. I maybe talk to somebody who's done it before.
Well, not only that, but you can't build a house with just a hammer, right? You need that arsenal. You need the tool kit, right? Yeah. I love it, man. Keep doing that because it's helpful, and when more people speak out about it, the better.
Yeah.
Last couple questions I have for you. Actually, last question I have for you, and then I want to get to your tour and your new album and all that good stuff. You said something, and I'm gonna butcher it, but I was just like, oh man, what was that quote? But I was just like, dude, that's gold. You referred to Mary as you're the bank and she's the water, correct? And yeah, tell me about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's it's a song that I wrote called Banks of Your River. And it's become like one of those songs, like wasn't a single, but like somehow just became a fan favorite. It streams really well. And it's probably the number one when we meet people that come up and say, I wrote that. I play that song for my kids because that's the way I want to love them. Or this is our wedding song, or this is at the birth of our first kid. It's like been used, and all the way I was writing it to her was just, she's just she's always been smarter than me. She's always, it's easier. She's more of a rule follower in a lot of great ways, but also just like, I know she does what she wants to do and she's going to go do it. And I love that about her. And it was like, a lot of reasons I fell in love with her. But at the same time, you obviously like, what does my love look like in that picture? I'm not just a yes person. I'm not, what is it? I think, the idea of a bank, like a river winding and using the bank to kind of help recorrect, it's like, you've heard, I think in counseling, they talk a lot about like, your spouse is a mirror a lot of times, for your behavior before they know you the best,
Yeah.
So like, if you can think about it, not as like a nagging wife, but like, oh, maybe she's seeing something I'm not seeing. She can help. But anyway, I think that's where that song came from. Just of like, it was a way to say a love song. We're older now too, kids and all that. If I play her a love song, it's like, I'll move a mountain for you. She's gonna be like, get that out of here. Like that's, what I mean? She's not so, what I mean? It's not a romantic comedy at this point.
Right.
Like we're in deep. So I needed to find a way to say like, hey, this is actually how I feel like I can love you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Man, that's funny. It reminds me of my wife and I have been married I've known her for 28 years, been married for 21. And yeah, she's sounds a lot like Mary, strong mom of boys, and same thing, do something. She's like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? But that love, man, that love is strong. Well, dude, this has been awesome. I've truly enjoyed this.
Thanks, man.
I looked at your tour and you're going to be here in my backyard next week.
Nice.
You'll be in St. Louis. Like, look at that.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that's
cool.
where I live. So, but tell us about the tour. Tell us about this new album.
Yeah, the new record came out a few months ago. It's and we're just out touring it. I guess say a few months, probably 6 months now. We're just, the truth is, man, we're having more fun than we've ever had as a band, which is
That's awesome.
Really a crazy thing to say. It's been over 20 years, a couple thousand shows, and I think it's because we're appreciative. Really, there's a crazy gratefulness that it's like in our camp right now that you can just feel. So I think that's a big thing. I think, if you haven't seen us live, that's what we do. Like, our records are good, but the live show is kind of like, has always been the calling card. We're a bigger band than we should be in terms of like, we've never really had hits. We're not, you know what I mean? So I think we're one of those bands like that. So anyway, I think come out and see the show if you get a chance. We're going to be playing all year. We're doing, we're going to the UK in the fall. And, yeah, it's a really busy time, but we're doing it because we love it.
That's awesome. Let me ask you before you head out, what has made this year so much more fulfilling than years past, so much more fun?
Man, I think we went through some transition. My brother left the band 4 or 5 years ago, which was just new and tough, and I think there was a little lack of confidence maybe in our camp, and even with like, we thought a little bit about like, well, will the audience want to come with us where we're going next and whatever. I feel like almost as if the band started over in a way, and so it's been 4 or 5 years now, and it feels like this band is getting its footing. This new lineup of the band is and they're all really good. It's the best musicianship we've had. All of us have gotten better, but it just feels like, man, we could open up or play with anybody in that way. So that's a really fun thing. You know what I mean? It's just like playing on a team where it's like, I know we got good dudes, and it's like you feel confident with it. It's felt that way, but I really think it's this. We are, I like to say the culture is completely different than it's ever been, but we do spend a lot of time talking about how thankful we are, and that we get to serve people.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like I tell whoever wants to listen, like that's what happiness is. And when you kind of get that through your mind, like, we're walking up here on the stage, we're going to have tons of, it's going to have all kinds of swag. It's going to be confident, all that. But ultimately what we're doing is the 16-year-old kid, never seen this band play before. We're trying to inspire him in whatever that thing is. I want to be a musician. I want to be better at this. I want to be a better son. you know, husband, whatever, all that stuff. Like to me, there's a power in that, because that happened to me. I went to shows when I was a kid and went, this is what I want to do. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think we feel that kind of like night in and night out, even though it's like, yeah, we played these songs before, but not in this place, not in front of these people. So yeah, it just, and I think also it's the older you get, the less these little mistakes or hiccups matter. You start going like, you know, that no one cares about this little, you know, the mic didn't come on in that one spot, all those kind of things. So like, that's also, I think there's not a lot of valleys out here anymore.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. You know, I've interviewed, you know, quite a few musicians on the podcast, and seen OAR quite a few times, and you could, we always get in the front row with those guys, and you could always tell like when something goes awry, and they're just like looking at each other, like, and they just kind of just keep going through it, you know, like y'all do.
Start laughing, man.
Yeah, just start laughing.
Yeah.
Last and final question: what is your favorite tattoo that you got?
Oh man, I just got so just funny you asked. I got 4 tattoos in the last 3 days.
What?
Yes,
you gotta be kidding me, man.
No,
We're
I'm
fresh ink.
Insane. Yeah, I don't know how it happened exactly. We brought a tattoo artist out with us on the road for a few days, and I kind of was like, oh, I only got these 3 days, and I love getting a tattoo right after I get off stage, because I'm already hyped from the show and all that stuff. I've got a couple hours, and so this is the newest one is right here. So if you can see it here.
I can see it. That's cool. Yeah. So
it says both and is what the words on the bottom. So it's my little, like, I'm not a yin and yang guy, but I am. There's a lot of goodness, you know. It's like with people, you got a lot of great traits that also have a dark side.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what that represents for me.
I love it, man. Did you ever get the banjo with the blood?
No, I do have. So
I heard you talk about that.
So there we go. Yeah, the outsider. So
the outsider, yes.
I got that tattoo like 15 years ago, and it's faded. It was all red. So I got it redone a couple nights ago. So I'm stoked about that.
I like it, man. Very, very cool. Well, Bear, this was awesome, man. I really
thanks for having me, man. Enjoyed it.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for opening up about your life, childhood, your boys, Mary, the tour, what these songs mean to you. It meant a lot. Guys, we're going to have all the links in the show notes. Head on over to dadedge.com/482 for the show. We're going to have social media accounts in there for Bear, as well as his tour dates, his website, the whole 9 yards. Go out, see his show. Go out, grab some of his music. It's awesome. You're a good man. I really enjoyed having you on.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
You bet.